Okay, here we go. We've got the clutch basket. We've got the new clutch plate, which goes in with the flange downwards. And then we have the pressure plate, and this has already got a new uprated bearing fitted. Now these uprated bearings are designed to take a sideways force because the clutch is pulled open, and it's pulled open with this rod which pulls on the bearing, which of course is pulling the bearing sideways. And a lot of bearings are not designed, or bearings generally aren't designed for a sideways force. So these are a special bearing which are designed to act sideways, so always recommended to uprate to those. And they're available from most Triumph suppliers. I think TMS is it in Nottingham, or LP Williams, or Burton Bike Bits, somewhere like that. The only thing is that you should really drill, it's recommended, Costa Zafiri, I think it's in Canada, recommended you drill 2 holes here so that you can get the bearing out if you ever need to change it, because the bearing's actually in 2 halves. So if we knock through this bearing to try and get it out, all that would happen would be the inner race would come out, and it would leave the outer race still in the housing, in the pressure plate. So and then it'd be very hard to get it out. So if you drill 2 little holes, you can then use a small drift to drift the outer race of the bearing out if you ever need to change it. Right, pressure plate, it's marked, and so is our clutch basket. So I'll put it back in the place it came off. I've put a very little bit of grease on these tongues here because they will be travelling up and down the clutch basket when the clutch is operated. Okay, then we have the diaphragm spring. So a Trident clutch is a single spring, which is fine. The only problem is you can't adjust it. That's the strength you've got. You can't make it any weaker or stronger, and it tends to be too strong, really. Unlike a normal, say, Bonville clutch, where you've got those springs that you screw in and you can adjust how tight they are. Okay, right, yeah, and that goes on sort of dish side down, or, well, is that the right way to describe it? So it looks like a dish with a curved bit at the top. Then we've got the cover plate, which, like the pressure plate. Now this can go on in three different positions. I don't know if I mentioned it before. So so what we're going to do is we're going to try and find the optimum position. Well, what I'll do is I'll assemble it, and if I'm not happy with the way that the clutch is releasing in this first position, then we'll take it apart again and move everything round. And we can also do the same with this cover plate. We can move it round into 3 different positions. I think I didn't mark that because it doesn't matter so much for the cover plate. There we go. Then, that's it, just checking the rule. Then we have these rather strange locking washer tabs, and they go round. And finally, we have the high tensile bolts that hold the whole thing together. Okay, and let's put those in. Okay, everything's kind of loosely tightened down now. Just check we're all seated there. Yeah. So put the clutch pull rod in there. I'm going to just add a couple of spacers because we need to get so we can put a nut on the threaded part of the clutch pull rod. There we go. Got our first nut down. And then we'll put a couple of lock nuts on. Okay, so it looks a bit complicated, but basically we just got a couple of spacers. Then we've got the nut that we're going to tighten down, and that's going to pull the push rod out and open the clutch. And we've got a couple of nuts locked together so that I can tighten this nut without the rod turning. So I'm going to hold the lock nut, and then I'm going to see how much. I'm going to say 1 flat, 2 flats, 3 flats, 3 flats, and still no sign of the clutch opening yet. 4 flats, 5 flats. Okay, clutch is now disengaged. So I'm going to use a feeler gauge to see how even the lift is. To see if the lift is even all the way around the clutch, because we can't control the actual amount of lift required, not in this case, but we can control how even the lift is by moving the various plates around relative to each other and seeing what we got. But it is laborious because you have to keep taking it apart and so on. It's too thick. Just a bit too thick. That's 12 thou. Try 10. A little bit thick there. 8. Right, so 8 there is giving me, that's 8 thou there. Feels bigger there. Feels a lot bigger there. So I'd say I've got about 15 thou gap there. Yeah. And then we're back to here, and we've got, we're back to 8 thou. Yeah. So we've got virtually twice as much lift in one part than on another. Assuming that these plates are flat and we've had them skimmed, so we assume that they are flat. It's just that one place. Everything else is a bit annoying because everything else is pretty bang on, 15 thou. But there's that one place, of course, where we started measuring, it's 8 thou. Yeah, that's all 15 thou. And then just here, it goes right down to 8 thou. It's up to 12 thou and then 15 thou on this side. Okay, so what we'll do is we're going to take it all apart again. We're going to move the pressure plate round and see if that will make any difference. Bear with me. Okay, so I've been messing around with this for a couple of hours, and I've tried turning the pressure plate around to different positions, but I've realised eventually, to try and even out that load and get the release even, but it's proved difficult. And I've realised that the main problem is the spring. When the tightness tends to move around with part of the spring. So anyway, so I've done what I can and I've evened it out. It's not ideal, but that is the problem. That you've got a fixed spring, so there's not much you can do about it. What they call Triumph Enthusiast in Australia, I think what they've done, they actually drill holes in this cover plate and put in little screws so they can actually adjust the tension on the spring. And I think that's really the only way of actually doing it, so you can adjust that tension. I mean, hopefully, I've got it. It's better than it was, but it's still a few thou. It lifts one side and not the other. But I think it'll be okay. We'll see. So what remains to be done? So I now need to nip over the lock tabs. I've just done these up as tight. I've just done them up pretty tight. I don't think there is a torque setting on them, the nuts, but they all need to be tight because obviously, they're fighting against that spring the whole time. And then I used my clutch centering tool which Richard did for me. I loosened it all back off and then centered the clutch. Got that so that the spigot engages with the bearing, so I know that the clutch is now in exactly the plate is in exactly central position, so that should slide on the hub without a problem. And so when those tabs are done up, then we're ready to put the clutch on. I think I've said before, if you don't have one of these tools, what I have done in the past is actually fitted the clutch still loose here, and centered it actually like in situ, sort of spun it, because what happens is if either it won't go on at all if it's not exactly straight on, or when it's what happens is there's a very tight clearance with this between the clutch and this housing, and that's why it's important to get it center. But as I say, if you haven't got a centering tool, put the whole clutch on loose and then just try and center it loose, tighten it up slightly, spin it to make sure it's not hitting the housing, and you're sorted. Don't forget that the first time you pull the clutch in, it will self-center anyway, but you do need it central to get it on in the first place. Right, so I'll do these tabs up and we'll fit it. Most important thing I'll mention is probably again is not to forget to fit the pull rod when we put the clutch actually in the housing. Okay, it's very easy to forget to do that. So I'll mention it again. So now we're going to fit the clutch unit onto the clutch hub. So again, the first thing we do is to put that pull rod in. We do not forget to fit that pull rod into the clutch. So easily done. And then hopefully, because that should just slide onto the spline. There it goes. Okay, and it's touching a bit because it's obviously all loose. It's not tightened up yet. But bear in mind that it's very, very tight, the clearance, as we were saying. The first time, if I support it, that's a bit better. But the first time you pull the clutch in, it will center itself anyway. But there we go, clutch fitted. And touch wood, that it'll be okay. But proof of the pudding is in the eating, as they say. Right. Anyway, clutch fitted, sorted. Well, clutch fitted anyway.